and I hope that was loud enough. It is continuing to be April 6th, and we are in our third work session. We're going to go through a recap of what was discussed a couple days ago, and then we'll move forward from there. And also just a reminder to the community, these are work sessions. We try to stick to a schedule, but if we have the ability to move forward in our schedule, like, you know, people will say, well, this wasn't scheduled till 11:15 and it's 10:45 and what's going on? Everything we do is videoed. Everything we do is available. It just may not be live. It may just be Memorex. You know, so I do apologize if somebody's saying, well, it's 11:15, why did they start 30 minutes early? Every piece of information we provide is captured either live or via YouTube. Appreciate, and as I expected, comments are coming in from the community for all different reasons. So this is the time to kind of capture it all. But Ted or Deb, did you have any opening comments you want to make? And we can go
Yeah, a
from
couple
there.
things, and run you through what we gave you today.
Okay.
And on the idea of televising, whether live or recorded, these sessions. On Tuesday, Commissioner Rothstein made a comment about Open Meetings Acts and how we handle this. I just wanted to point out that state law does not require us to do this in open session at all until we get to the proposed budget. In fact, there was a time when this room used to be full for the release of the proposed budget because people were coming to find out what happened or didn't happen. Nobody comes anymore because everybody knows what's going on. But it's a choice that the board makes. Then we talked some about the Piney Run Dam and the changes. You got some more information between then and now. I just wanted to touch on that. We have not gotten any official notification that we are not going to get the grant. So it's not that there's no chance. The concern is that our assessment of the likelihood has changed from when we first started doing this, from we thought it was something that was going to happen to now something that seems unlikely to happen. So you have a few more pieces of paper. The top of what says 4/6/23 session is a list of the things that you acted on Tuesday. Need to make a note on one of them. About somewhere between halfway and 2/3 of the way down those bullets, you see Eldersburg Library feasibility study and construction funding of $18 million. You might remember we did not, in that conversation, determine how we were funding it. So that's not built into the numbers you're going to see. But when you get to, no.
At all, because it would be after.
Oh, okay, yes, right. So it's not built into the plan, number one, because we didn't decide how we're going to do it, and number two, because of the timing of when this would likely happen. So debt service would hit outside of the 6 years that we're talking about. That makes it no less important to think about it, though. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean we don't have to deal with it. Then you see the bottom line. As it exists, if we assume everything you decided on Tuesday remains when you finally adopt your proposed budget. Then, was the assignments the second thing or third thing that they have?
Oh, yeah, we also have to talk about the tree trimming.
Oh, yes, okay, thank you. Yep, told you things are always changing. We actually found out something between Tuesday and today. The vendor that had our tree trimming contract, and this is trimming along our roadways, got bought out by another vendor. This was rebid. The new lowest bid is $180,000 more than what we had been, so we have to build that into our plan now. So that was unexpected. And then Commissioner Guerin had asked about the budget analysts and how we divide up assignments. So we provided all of you with the spreadsheet that shows who does what. You might notice that some lists are longer than others. This is all a matter of balancing how much time budgets take. Not every budget is equivalent. So sometimes what looks like an easy load might actually be the harder load.
Did the analysts get to pick their color?
No,
Okay, just,
although,
Maybe they did. What was that?
oh, okay, there you go. Heidi said, yeah, right.
What'd you ask?
I picked my color.
Were they able to pick their own color? Oh, I think they did.
oh, okay. Yeah, and I actually responded too quickly. I thought you were going to, do they pick their assignments?
No,
But you were on something much more important than that.
just saying, don't take yourself serious, do everything you do very seriously, and picking your colors, okay.
Anything else?
They also
The
have
revenue,
the sheet that shows them what a penny means in revenue and if local income tax were changed. Personal property and recordation. That's it.
Okay, so we can dive back in.
okay. I expect thoughts and ideas flooded your minds as we went through the last couple days. I know they have been with mine. What's on your mind? Any ideas up front?
I'll start with just a quick question, or maybe it's not a quick question, I don't know. So when we were discussing the library the other day, the figure of 18 million was put out there. Where did that come from? I mean, if we don't have the feasibility study and we don't know what is ultimately going to happen, where does the 18 million?
That's an early estimate for doing a modernization. So
Okay.
the existing building remains, we're just redoing things within it. We don't have current estimates for tearing down and replacing on site or building at another site.
Just to kind of follow on that question, how recent is that estimate?
In the last few months,
Okay,
In the fall, yeah.
okay, so fall of '22 then? Okay.
Revisiting the tax situation. If you can put that up on
Sure.
the screen for me. You know, I feel like it's, you know, Robin Hood, you know, steal from the rich, pay to the poor, or something like that. And you made comments about the type of tax that we adjust is associated more or less with a certain population within the community. And I appreciate that, and, but I don't feel like I captured it well enough. Can you kind of go back through that for me?
sure. Yeah, with property tax, you know, if you go read academic stuff about taxes, you'll see property tax called a regressive tax, because the tax is determined by the value of your home, but it has no connection to how much income you have to be able to pay that. So it, you know, largely, property tax rate increases would impact lower income people more than it does higher income people. They have more room to be able to absorb it. Income tax works the other way around. It tends to have a greater impact on higher income people than lower income people. And in saying this, I am not making any value judgments. I'm just, you know, talking about, you know, mechanically, you know, different taxes affect different populations differently.
And income tax is considered progressive.
Progressive is what the term, yeah.
And then, we don't talk much about recordation because it's a much smaller, number, but we do have the authority to adjust. And that's kind of what I want to do is kind of throw out all the things that we have authority to
Right.
to adjust. So recordation, if we were to adjust recordation, is there a,
Well, that would also be a regressive tax because everybody would pay the tax in exactly the same way. So if you have less income, it has a greater impact on you. And on income tax and being progressive, Maryland has relatively few brackets. So it is not as progressive as in some places, where you might have 10 or 12 brackets, as you become higher and higher income, you're affected by greater and greater tax changes. Maryland is not a flat tax, but we're not hugely far from it.
and property tax right now is 1.018, and income right now is 3.03.
Right.
And income, we have the flexibility, or no, the authority to go to 3.20.
Yes.
Okay, like I said, I want to put all this on the table. If we don't look at increasing revenue into our budget, into our coffers, we will not have the ability to accomplish not just what we've already, suggested we accomplish, but there's a laundry list of other ideas to include salary adjustments and everything else. So, we have a choice to, I feel, to either list all the things we want to spend money on and then go back and say, okay, how are we going to pay for it? Or give us an understanding that the inevitable is going to happen and taxes are going to be touched if we're to achieve this, and put it out on the table now. So, that's the, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. So, income tax, so when it was adjusted years ago, was it adjusted both in income and property tax?
Yes. You're talking about the decreases at this point, right?
Decreases,
Yes.
correct. And it was both.
Yes.
Was there, do you remember the rationale on why it was both, or what the, why didn't they just stick to, income tax and not property tax? Were they trying to be equitable?
Well, at the time, I would say the moves were largely philosophical. They wanted to demonstrate that they were doing something to reduce the tax burden in Carroll County. Those were our two major revenues, and that's where they ended up.
Didn't they do it a couple different times? So it wasn't one big jump at one time. I think they adjusted them over a couple different years, if I recall.
So, to me, the burden of Carroll County is another way of looking at it, and that's not the taxes of Carroll County, but it's ensuring we achieve the things we want to achieve in safety and security and having the best schools and a quality of life in Carroll County. So that's the burden of us, is how do we achieve those results, especially with that herd of elephants that's daunting of education in front of us, to achieve the fire EMS, which is not necessarily a herd, but a very large elephant that's still in front of us. And not even talking about turf fields or athletic complexes or anything else. But if you look at those massive rocks in that jar, I think we need to look seriously at our property tax and our revenue coming into the budget. So, and it's not just a flat line FY '24. That's not going to get us where we want to go. It's to have the ability to look out beyond FY '24 in order to balance this budget and further.
So to the point you're making, I talk with people about this. I often, in some way, say, you always have to look at both sides of the equation. You can't say we're spending too much or too little, or we're taxed too much or too little, without considering both.
Right.
If you want this level of service, then you have to say, are we willing to pay for that level of
Right.
service? If you only want this level of resources, then you have to say, are we willing to live with what that will fund?
Right.
No right or wrong answers, but you have to choose how to make it work.
But it's not just wants, and it's not just likes. It's demands. And the demands are put on us, whether they're put on us from the state or they're put on us from legislation to establish the fire EMS. It's not just, the wants and the wishes, but it's the demands of our safety, security, and our schools. And just put quality of life issues to the side for a second. To include all these salary increases that folks are wanting from the court system, state's attorneys, the sheriff, the library, funding the education, funding fire EMS. To me, this is an elephant, So I don't know what your thoughts are. I'm kind of,
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, I will add, it sounds like then we have a lot of work to do, and we need to go back and take a look at some of these big rocks. In addition to that, continue our conversations with the Carroll County Public School System to see what they can do to meet us on that second $6.7 million, because I am opposed to raising taxes.
Okay.
I am unequivocally opposed to doing that right now.
So what rocks?
Well, I guess that's our challenge.
Okay.
That's
So,
my
yeah.
2 cents.
So, I appreciate it. So that's kind of where we're at, What,
I mean, some of the big rocks that stick out to me, and again, I just can't get past, I know the Piney Run Dam is a substantial issue. PFAS mitigation, that's, I think, $18 million right there, that going into this budget cycle, I guess I didn't really appreciate some of the requirements there. But again, this being my first budget cycle, didn't think it was gonna be easy.
yeah.
But I think we need to go back to the drawing board then.
The
Then-
two you mentioned are unusual. Of course, there's often something unusual, but those are two that just came up. I don't believe there's anything we can do about them. We can still look for the possibility that we're going to get grant funding on the dam, and it won't be as expected, but I can't sit here and tell you to count on that.
The amount of discretionary dollars that we have to play with, not play with, excuse me, but to move around, is becoming less because of what is, put in front of us to establish a fire EMS, to look at the schools and, they gave us the laundry list of what that 6.7 million would accomplish. And it was not a pick or choose which one, but it was, we need all of these things because they have decreased their staffing over years and they don't feel like they can keep up. And I'm not speaking for them. I just, they didn't change their tune. They kind of gave us the same equation, this plus this equals that. And that was that slide that the superintendent and the board and said, we need to do this just to stay with our lips above the water line. That's why I was pushing that 6.7. But if there's other things that we believe should not either be considered or taken off, and that's why I brought up the salaries. You know, that is going to be significant numbers if we move forward with the state's attorneys, the courts, the public library, you know, and then I know the sheriff also asked, but let's keep away from him, not just those three. So, with that said, what do we either not want to do? What do we want to remove from the list to get us closer to a balanced budget? I mean,
Well, so I you know, echo Commissioner Guerin's sentiments. I do harbor reservations about raising taxes. I mean, these are difficult economic times, and it's not just that, you know, we as a county government need to concern ourselves with, like you said, reexamining what we're considering, but also recognizing that our citizens are also facing the same difficulties in everyday life. You know, we have gone through a number of suggestions, and we've looked at these lists of these additional requests and other things that we are confronted with. And, you know, we have the responsibility to try to meet certain obligations, delaying others, whatever the case may be. And so going back to maybe re-examine some of the things we talked about this past Tuesday, or last Tuesday, would be a good idea. But I certainly do take the point that revenue is an issue. I'm not,
So-
you know, like to be very clear again, I'm not saying we raise taxes, but it is also a reality. I mean, I don't know whether that means that we have to incur heavier debt to be paid off in the future, and I hate suggesting that, because that is, you know, that's taking problems that we're confronted with today and expecting future generations to have to contend with them. And I know that also seriously and you know, probably to some degree deleteriously affects our credit in the future. But again, you know, looking at the reality is that our citizens are doing the same thing. I was reading a study the other day that the majority of Americans right now are using their tax refunds to pay for food. And if they are using tax refund money to pay for food, telling them, well, you're going to have to pay more in you know, income taxes now, is going to be a difficult proposition to you know, push forward. And again, that's not to take away from the argument that yes, we have our own difficulties as a government entity in the services that we're providing. But again, that's also to you know, bring into the conversation, as you know, Ted had mentioned, you're looking at all sides of this, that you know, anything that we do increase will hit people hard if that is the road that we go down. And like I said, I have grave reservations about doing that.
can we
On
put
your
up the-
comment about,
while you're saying that, can you just put up the Word document from decisions we made?
on your comment about the impact of taking on more debt service, you can be comfortable, we actually, in a fiscal way, you know, looking at how much debt can we manage, we're in good shape. But our problem is we don't have any additional revenue available for taking on the debt service. So it's, conceptually, we're good. In practice, we're not.
Right, and that makes sense. And you know, the other thing I was thinking about on Tuesday, and I appreciate the discussion that we had you know, about everything. I know, for example, with Visa, we decided not to proceed with certain items for the buildings, certain projects for the buildings, right? And I'm not bringing this up as a way to say, well, we should do that. And I had a conversation with Sheriff DeWeese a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how, you know, and I think he has a really wise philosophy about this, about, you know, is the emphasis on things that we're doing or on the people that we're trying to attract and retain to serve the county? We may not have, you know, say the most up-to-date HVAC system on a certain building, but do we have the people in place we need to provide the services? And you know, while I take the argument that taking on additional debt to fund certain things, you know, we don't have that you know, revenue, I guess is the best way to put that right now. To take on, I mean, the debts for revenue for the debt service, I mean, you know, I guess I adhere to that same philosophy. I would much rather place emphasis on people right now that are able to provide the best possible services with what limited resources we can provide, than say, okay, well, we have this, I'm just going to make something up, this beautiful new clock-making facility. I'm totally making that up. I'm not saying we need a clock-making facility. But I would much rather say that, yes, we have, well-paid people in the state's attorney's office who are prosecuting child abuse crimes. We just had the proclamation this morning about that. Then saying, okay, well, we have, a cutting-edge solar power system on the roof.
But
Yes.
with that said, and I don't disagree, but that clock-making tower, or whatever, with everything we have, is ag preservation. Is $2.5 million that we agree to leave into ag preservation. There's, the financial management system, to get us to what we need done. There's some big ticket items that we've said we're willing to put in place, Again, not, and, this is a great list that we've come up with, but somebody's got to pay for it. And the county has two options. One is decrease this list, look at the other list, and either increase and decrease, and/or look at revenue. I have not been a proponent of increasing taxes the last 4 years, but we are in a position, and probably in retrospect, it should have been adjusted years ago, fees and taxes, and also looking at other ways of bringing funds in. Impact fees don't work here in the county, but excise fees and other ways just to be innovative, but looking at everything. Some work, some don't. This is something we have, an ability to do. Nobody wants to do it, I understand that.
Right.
But if you don't want to do it, then were we willing, just from this list, if we can just, I feel, take something off it?
One of the comments that Commissioner Vigalotti was making, I think there's a couple important ideas that are worth emphasizing. You talked about spending money on taking care of things we have versus people. If you look at the money we spend on maintaining facilities, infrastructure that we have, maintaining our fleet, I think I would struggle to argue to you that we are spending more money than we need to. My concern is, are we spending as much money as we need to? So I don't think there's room there to help you any without causing a different set of problems. Then the other thing was, taking on new projects. For 12 years now, we've done very little new of any significance, and really the two biggest examples are going on right now, State's Attorney Headquarters and the Sheriff Headquarters. Mm-hmm. Those are our two biggest projects for the last 15 years, probably. We have to do something for the State's Attorney because they need to leave the court out at annex, but both those buildings are choices that we're making. And I'm not suggesting we could easily abandon them. I'm just saying, when you look at, can we do less than we're doing, there's not a whole lot to look at.
As we all know, budgets have to come down versus needs versus wants. And to your point, Ted, with the state's attorney's office, part of that is, correct me if I'm incorrect, wasn't part of that state mandated on us at one point? Or there was potential legal challenges or possible concerns?
We were ordered by the circuit court judge to leave the building.
Yes. So to me, we talk about safety, we talk about security, we talk about education, and all of those are, major pillars in what we need to do first and foremost. I think we also need to take a serious hard line look at what areas could be potentially state mandated. We know obviously education, state's attorney and so forth and so on. And we're looking at a potential $18 million build for a library. and you're telling me the CIP was in fall of '22, my concern personally, and I've mentioned this on Tuesday, and I know 3 of my fellow colleagues, I can't speak for the other 2, you may have been over, I'm not saying you have or you haven't, but, we have the Robert Moton building bursting at the seams. We have a challenge there because part of that state situation, they dictate to us, we have to obviously handle that. We've got a number of tenants in that building. We've got some potential tenants that would like space in that building. Health Department would like a portion of that. We know the former Friends of Robert Moton would like some additional space. Board of Elections, from my tours, and I know some of you other commissioners that took tours, they're packed. I'd be shocked if they're not violating fire code, no disrespect to them at this point. Could we get potentially in a situation where the state comes down on us if they need additional equipment and causes us to have to spend that money and do something if we're not proactive there? Not against the library idea. I'm just concerned that from a state mandate position, where does that put us? From what little bit of research I've done, my understanding is, you're looking at about 28,000 square feet, which would be warehouse and also office space for them. My understanding is a small portion of that we'd be having to fully fund, and the state would split part of that 50-50 with us. That's not a solution. It's still us spending money no matter what. But I guess my big concern is we've got to deflect and deal with enough state mandates. The question becomes, do we look at those as key priorities first and foremost, be it blueprint, be it, a location for them that's suitable? Because with this upcoming presidential election, I'm very concerned as to where that may put us. If a water pipe breaks in that building, we have huge problems beyond anything. I don't want to make the national news. That's just
So-
one of my
Yeah,
concerns.
so let's take the library feasibility study off, that 125,000, and, because the 18 million hasn't even been into the mix. Okay, I mean, is that what everybody wants? Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, now the bottom line is $6.1 million in negative.
And did we get any, and I don't know if we actually formally asked the state's attorney's office if they could prioritize those 3 positions, in addition to, I guess they are going to have a vacant investigator position coming up as well, so that would be 4 vacant positions at the state's attorney's office. But I think, I know I would still like to get some clarification on their rank order,
We did get,
because I don't know if we can do all of them.
there were 2 ranked at 1 and 1 ranked at 2. I don't have them there anymore.
The software integrator would be the priority number 2, and the other 2 ERU positions, the paralegal and the investigator, would be his first priorities.
Right, and I had the same conversation with the state's attorney's office, except he didn't break it down 1 and 2. He just said, if there's anything he can ask for, it's these 3 positions, because again, it's a system of systems. So,
And I did, by the way, I found out some more information about why they want a specific building security officer versus a deputy. And as was relayed to me, the reason why is because they want a security officer who's independent of the sheriff's department or other law enforcement agencies, given that they might have a case that involves the sheriff's department. So they want to be able to maintain a sense of independence about security, given that, like a visiting deputy may be part of a case.
but we haven't even approved that one either.
Right, but I was just,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
sharing information that I learned.
So, that associate software integrator, is there an agreement to either keep it on or to take it off at this point?
Now, just, and not that this drives your decision, but when we say he prioritized them, I'm sure if you don't include it in this budget, he is still going to be asking for it in the next budget. It's not going to make it
Well,
go
sure.
away.
No, absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Well, if we're serious about trying to get our spending under control and again, hard choices, I would say take the number 2 priority off, and then we'll face that in the coming year. And I know that sounds like we're just putting it off for next year, but if we really are going to try to manage this year by year, I guess we have to face things as they come up year by year. Certain things you can certainly project and plan out for in advance, but
I think that's also, no, I appreciate that, but that's also what gets us, I feel, in a position that we're not having the ability to forecast a budget out beyond 1 year. And what has been done in the past is sometimes the proverbial putting lipstick on a pig by making it look good for the out years, but we're really still in a hole. And what I appreciate about this last year is we did not do that. We said, listen, we're okay for this year and possibly next year and maybe even the third, but it's going to get really ugly. Now, and that was before Blueprint. Now with Blueprint, it gets ugly on the first year.
Gotcha.
So,
All right, so you might as well leave it in then.
no, I mean, no, that's fine. I just,
Well,
my point is that if we're looking, my comments about taxes are not to be associated just with this year, but is to get us on stable footing that's going to hit us hard in FY '25, '26 with the blueprint that's just out there. And exactly what Commissioner Gordon said, there are mandates that we're not going to have a choice, whether we, yell about them or not. If we don't do it, they're going to do it for us with our own money. And I'd rather have the ability to tell our story on how we're using our money than the state coming down to us, saying, we told you you need to do this, and you're not going to fund it. Well, we're going to take some of your money, and we're going to fund it for you. So,
And Commissioner Vigliotti's point about putting it off to next year, I think it's probably an important time to tackle this idea. We're required by state law to balance an FY24 budget. The rest of this is not required. I think it's a good thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. I'll always argue to do it. But, if we go where you said, then the 5 years becomes almost meaningless. You're saying it's not this year, so it doesn't matter. Now, there are plenty of jurisdictions who
Oh,
only.
yes, I wasn't saying it doesn't matter. I was
I'm
just
saying
yeah.
the end implication is.
Oh, okay.
Even if it's not what you were thinking,
Okay.
that's kind of what you're left with. There are a lot of jurisdictions that simply, they balance next year's budget. And I think you can see with everything that's on the table in front of you, right now, if you guys wanted to balance FY24, there's a series of choices you could make. We could be done today. 24 is going to be balanced, but you would have left yourself with problems in 25 and 26 and 27, which is why, I'm always arguing we ought to be considering those other years, so you're not making decisions that only dig yourself a hole to come out of next year.
I agree with that.
Oh, and
Voting.
yeah, and on the library, you didn't actually vote on that. So is that an action to remove the library?
Motion to remove the library from the list of expenditures?
the 125,000 feasibility.
Yes.
Second.
Say again?
Second.
Okay, I got a motion, I got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm against. So it's 3-2,
3-2 to take it out?
correct?
Yes.
Who was against?
And
Commissioner Kyler and I.
I think I'd like to look harder at what's in the budget for the EMS fire. And I still think, which I brought up the other day, the billing technician's premature. And I'm not sure about the data analyst also. And with the number of people they're working on hiring, I struggle to add two more.
So Commissioner, your thought is that neither one of those positions should be this year?
The two positions, yeah, that we added for fire EMS, and that's all ongoing money,
Right.
I don't know, 168.
Chief Robinson came and talked to us about that.
Hmm?
Chief Robinson came and talked to us about that,
Yes, yes.
which I agree. I was a bit taken back because I wasn't expecting positions to be discussed from them.
Well, we had discussed it before, if I recall correctly. My concern about, in particular, the EMS billing technicians, we don't want to be caught flat-footed on that one. That could have very negative effects, not just lost potential revenue to go back into the system, but we could run afoul of all the different various Medicare, I don't even know, all the details. So that would be my concern there. As far as the data analyst position goes, I made it clear yesterday that that would be something we'd have to take a look at and see what happens. Are we looking at a position where we're hiring somebody, or eventually looking at a situation where we're maybe contracting some of that out? I don't know. I just don't want to be I just don't want to be caught flat-footed on either one of those.
So can we request more information then from Chief Robinson about the data? Because I think the data is important. I take the point about whether the position is central to the data, but I think the is it data or data?
Whatever you want to say.
I think the data is important because I mentioned the other day that helps us understand the situations that we're facing, that helps evince arguments we make for grants and for other sources of funding. If we can't show, for example, we have X number of EMS calls a year, then we don't qualify to the level of a certain amount of grant funding.
There's really not very much grant opportunity we're looking at that would be a danger to us. Maybe someday when we're talking about fire, then we have the safer grants, but that's not where we are now.
It has a lot to do with planning and development in the county. And it's been, stubby pencil type of work, which I'm not saying is not accurate, because it's only as accurate as you put the information in. But it's been very frustrating for the departments, for years. So getting some level of, analysis that they can use, I think, is important. And at least when I used to attend ESAC, that was a large part of it, was the information. wasn't always-
Noting the concerns, if it's okay, I can have that discussion with Chief Robinson based on what we're staring at right now.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more about it, and is there already staff that
Can do it.
on a part-time basis can do this?
We've had those discussions, actually. We do have people that are qualified to do that type of work in the building, working for other departments and bureaus. Those people do exist in the county government, but we don't have anybody like that there. But we did look at that. But if it's okay with the board, I'll have an additional conversation with Chief Robinson. And if you could just refresh my memory, Mr. Liskey, that we have a lot of open positions in county government right now. It's not unusual for positions to go unfilled. So that money that was budgeted for those departments at the end of the fiscal year, if those positions are unfilled, that money is going back into the surplus. But we can't reprogram that mid-fiscal year. We can't take that money and do something else with it. That is a very simplified question.
No, you can, but it might be more complicated than you're thinking. Now, if we have we do have an open budget analyst position, so there's some money not being spent. You could take that money, the board can move money from one budget to another, so that's in your hands. But what exactly does that mean? If you're not going to eliminate the budget analyst position, then you still need that budget. So putting it somewhere else means you've decided not to fund that position. The only money that would be available would be whatever money wasn't spent this year. If you wanted to buy a desk, you have a one-time expenditure, one-time savings. That will work.
I'm sitting here and I'm actually realizing right now, given the tremendous challenges we have, that it sounds like the next budget cycle for us will start on July 2nd.
Right.
And I think that, as much as I hate to say that, it sounds like what we're really up against from this point forward. So we can have that discussion on July 2nd, but it seems to me like this is just going to be an ongoing process now, so we can make this
It
work.
is. It becomes more public for a while, but it never really goes away.
Yeah.
And that's also what I shared with the superintendent, with all these, you know, again, daunting requirements that are in front of her, is that we need to have these conversations, like you said, on July 2nd. We need to start right away, because, I mean, it's just, it is an ugly, I mean, that money that we're, you know, said we put into their budget, that, you know, to make it to 13.4, wasn't even associated with Blueprint. It was a little
Yeah.
bit of it. It was more just associated with getting your schools up to where they need to be. And I mean, there's just things in Blueprint that just terrify me.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with them. I don't agree with how it's working, but I also unfortunately understand that if we don't do something about it, they're gonna make us do something with our own money. And I don't like that. That bothers me even more, so. What else, I mean, like I said, there's even positions and things on the list that were given to us the other day, or, you know, with the agencies, that we didn't even consider yet. So are there other, you know, Sheriff's Office degree stipend? Are there any thoughts, ideas on that?
I guess for something like that, I would want to, I mean, I understand the presentation of the stipend, but I'm wondering if somehow that can be rolled into salaries, rather than it being its own separate program, whether or not it's possible to weave something like that into salary structure. I mean, I don't know.
Yes, you could. That would actually be more expensive. So once you put it in the salaries, then as salaries grow, it grows. That also affects your pension costs. You know, the stipend as presented to you would be a fixed dollar amount that you get in addition to your salary.
So it's more cost-effective if we go with a stipend.
If you're going to do it, that's less expensive, yes.
Regarding the library, I don't agree with salary increases with the library. And the library and those there know how much I feel about them, I believe. But I think they can achieve it with the positions that they want to add. I think it's like 2 positions, maybe 3 they want to add.
3. But
Three.
what do you mean they can achieve it?
They can achieve the results that they want to achieve in the library system by adding positions and not necessarily providing the salary increases.
I don't think you could even get remotely close to them agreeing with that. You know, the challenge, you know, they're facing challenges like everybody is on positions. But, you know, we have right now and have had 3% growth built in for the library. So anything that they're going to do for salaries has to come out of that 3%, along with any other cost changes that they have to do. Right now, it's pretty hard to argue that 3% gives you room to, you know, try to remain competitive.
But I believe if they were to prioritize between the positions and the salary increases, they would prioritize positions over salary increase at this time.
I'm not sure that they would, but I can't answer that.
I can. So. So that would be my recommendation, is that we do not put in the salary increases into the FY24 budget. However, we do provide the positions and benefit packages.
So just a quick question, and I apologize if I may have missed it. The briefing sheet, I think, said it was 3 positions and 2 benefits packages?
Correct.
But then on the back, it said 5 benefits packages. Does that mean that each of the 3 full-time positions are automatically benefits packages?
Yes,
Okay.
you're thinking about it right.
All right, thank you.
Any thoughts?
Oh, about adding the positions but not increasing the salaries?
Correct.
And just to be clear, there are salary increases included in the recommended budget. Commissioner Rothstein's not suggesting, or you're not suggesting taking
10.2.
What's that?
those out. There are increases. People watching need to
Right,
understand
right.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
clarify that.
No, yeah, no, thanks.
Remember, the library is different,
Okay.
Ted. So we don't determine the salaries or the increases for the library staff. Do you want to, because they're not on your payroll. So
Right.
they're different than
And they can move money appropriately the way they see fit.
Okay, so they have the ability to
They
do
have
what
the
okay.
flexibility and getting a better understanding recently from the library system. I think this would be a priority for them, is to increase the positions and benefits and giving them the flexibility rather than focusing on salary increases.
I want to go back to Commissioner Guerin's question for a second. We didn't quite get there. We fund the library. They're not on our payroll. We don't specifically fund salary increases. We don't make a recommendation for salary increases. But what they have in the recommended budget right now is a 3% salary increase. So the most that they can give, unless other costs go down, would be a 3% increase. And in practice, because other costs have gone up, they probably can't even do an actual 3% increase. And also, you've heard this before, but just a reminder, the library is overwhelmingly funded by the county. Probably more than 90% of their budget comes from us. They get about $1 million from the state. They don't have to do this, but historically, that's been used for buying materials. So in a practical way, operations is in our hands.
Right. So again, that's my recommendation.
Is it a motion?
It's a motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. So we got a motion to move forward with the positions and benefits and not move forward with the salary increases at this time. Again, this is all working. We got a long ways to go.
Right.
As we all see this. Okay, got a motion, got a second. Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Against? I didn't see. Did everybody say aye? Kenny? Did you,
Oh, was I? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mike, did you say aye?
I did.
Okay,
I did, I
thanks.
mean,
Just, I want to revisit the study for the library expansion or renovation, whatever, not expansion, but renovation or modernization. Ted, you shared with us that there's a certain amount of state coffers or state money that goes across all jurisdictions. I had a conversation with the librarian, I think it was down in Mako, which was a great time to have it because we talked about this. And librarians, like other small groups, they talk to each other. And they have this, I don't want to say a pecking order, but a kind of a develop an agreement of what's coming up next. And I don't know how much we can validate that, but, you know, her understanding, and that's Andrea, to me, was that we would be coming up next, Carroll County, or we'd be part of that, I think it was either $7 or $9 million, I can't remember.
$7.5 million.
$7.5 million. So therefore, putting a study in place allows them to say, okay, you're serious about this, we will then provide you money. If we don't have a study in place, then they're not going to recognize us in doing that. So I understand what the vote was, a few minutes ago, but I always want us to think about that, to revisit that again. You got to put skin in the game. It's kind of like the traffic plans that we put in place for the state. If we're not willing to put it in a higher priority, they're not going to even look at us. So, I don't know if you want to revisit it now or just,
Well, along with what you're saying, that would also be one-time money.
the study,
Yes.
right?
So does that have to affect the bottom line on the budget?
The impact to your operating plan would be the debt service that we're going to take on unless we fund it fully with cash.
But we wouldn't know what was available or what the cost was unless we knew what the state was willing to do. I mean, the worst thing that could ever happen is that we do a study and the state comes back and says, nope, we're not going to fund you or even partly fund you, and then we have a study on the shelf.
Yes, and we can say, let's not build any funding into our program until we have the answer to that. But if you're going to do that, I would argue you probably need to be sticking some money on the sideline, because if you spend the money you have and
Yeah.
then say, we'll figure it out when we get there, with what money are you going to do it?
Well, there'll be no snowstorms next year, is what I was told, so. No, I understand. But, again, putting skin in the game to allow the state to recognize that this is something that we want to happen. I'm still, since I'm on the library kick.
Yeah, and like we talked about on Tuesday, it's a awkward process, how the timing of these decisions goes with us
Right.
and this state. We can't get past that, and we won't have answers when we'd like to have answers. But I think it's far more likely than not that even if the state's in on this project, you are still a bigger player than the state is.
Yeah,
So I believe, even if we can't identify exactly what the number is, we still would need to be saying, here's what we're planning for today. It may change, but we need to build in whatever we think that could be. And in saying that, I'm not arguing for you to do this or not. Just if you're going to do it, I just want to push to make sure we've
right.
planned for it as best we can.
And in the operating budget, the cost of building it, all that would show up in the operating budget would be debt service, if that's how you chose to
Yes.
finance it.
Yes.
But I think you also said we're in a, and this is what is, troubling me a little bit more in this discussion. I believe it was also said a couple minutes ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, we are, hard pressed to account for any additional debt service.
Right, well, right now, we have negatives all the way across. So whether it's debt service or any of the other expenditures you're talking about, right now, we don't know how we're going to pay for them.
Right.
So in practice, and I'm not encouraging this thinking, but you could take on additional debt service. The impact right now would be those negatives become larger negatives. We become further away from saying we know how we're going to pay for this. Now, in the end, we will always balance the budget. It's just what choices are we setting ourselves up for, when we get to one of those years?
And I, I understand, but, again, putting skin in the game to allow the state to recognize that this is something that we want to happen. I mean, the worst thing that could ever happen is that we don't have a study in place. So revisiting the library study for that, whatever it was, 125,000. I know it was a 3-2 vote. Have I swayed anybody to move in another direction? If so, we'll move forward. If not, we'll move forward. Go ahead, Joe.
And again, if I am remembering this correctly, and again, please do correct me if I'm wrong, doing the feasibility study basically is a commitment that we're going to do something. Why would we do a feasibility study if we were not intending to follow up on it? And the discussion that we're having at this point is, you know, how are we trying to avoid raising taxes? How are we trying to keep certain expenditures under control? So when we were talking about this on Tuesday, I was looking at the feasibility study more as something that was disconnected from, you know, the course of action until I was reminded that well, you don't do the feasibility study unless you are, you know, intent on pursuing the course of action that it pertains to. And again, if again, it's not that I disagree that there needs to be some kind of renovation or something down there, but I go back to that point that I made earlier about, you know, if you're talking about adding the additional positions. I would much rather the buildings be properly staffed
Right.
and, you know, try to figure out how to pay for $18 million. I mean, because again, that was, you know, where would that come from right now? Where would that, I mean, unless we funded it entirely from cash, we would have to accumulate debt to do that, and we have no idea for sure that the state is, I mean,
Okay.
if next year we go to our delegates and we say, hey, we want you to advance this cause and see if you can obtain any funding for something like this. We write a letter of support. We make it a policy that we're interested in pursuing the library rather than funding the feasibility study. If we can get some advance, I don't want to say committal, but some advance interest from the state, I would be more comfortable with pursuing this. But right now, having absolutely no idea, you know, how we would approach this.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there.
Yes.
First, I think your chance of getting other state funding is very, very close to zero.
Right.
They're going to say, we have a pot of money identified for that purpose. We're not doing that. Doing the feasibility study is not a commitment in any legal way. It doesn't force you to do anything. But just in practice, I would say, you know, where you were, why spend the money to do a feasibility study without an intent to actually move ahead with a project? But you can choose to. And then another thing to think about here is if you do nothing with the library, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be anything happening. You know, much like a school, even if we don't replace or modernize, when the roof needs to be replaced, we're still going to replace the roof. When the HVAC has to be done, that's still going to happen. We will spend money on Eldersburg Library. There's no question about that. It's just just in what way are we going to do it?
Is the maintenance necessary or needed on Eldersburg Library getting to a critical point? That may not be a question for you to answer, but, you know, my understanding it's a very old HVAC that would need significant renovation, and the cost effectiveness of actually renovating a building to meet to a certain standard, or looking at the large, you know, potential. Yeah, I agree. I don't think we can get state funding from the delegation, but I do think that, you know, with the librarian having those conversations with the library community, going after those dollars, that's a different story.
Yeah,
I apologize.
So on your question about, or your thought about replacing the HVAC as a standalone or doing a larger project, again, I'll go back to schools. I think almost anybody would say, ideally, let's do a full modernization or let's replace the building. That's not really the question, though. You know, it's how much are we willing to spend? And on Eldersburg specifically, when we get to replacing the HVAC, if there is no other project, what we're going to do is replace the HVAC system that is in place. That has implications for changes they'd like to make and how they use the building, because if you're going to change where walls are, if you're going to change where rooms are, then the HVAC has to change along with it. So, like all these things, it'd be so nice if there were just simple answers, yes, no, that way's cheaper, that way's more expensive, but it rarely works that way. And right now, Eldersburg is scheduled, if nothing else happens, for a roof replacement in '27 and HVAC in '28. So I guess if you want to grab for things to hang on to, if you do a bigger project, we would actually,
Not do those.
well, I'd say we take these projects out, but something else will move in. The next highest priority will come in, so it doesn't save you anything.
But I mean, those projects, I mean, the total, I apologize, the total
I was
cost of
gonna
those
say, do you have a
projects-
magnitude of cost
Right,
for
yeah.
that,
Exactly.
roughly?
They're looking.
Because that may give us a better feel, because if that's, you know, a significant amount, that can,
800,000.
Altogether,
The two.
for the two together,
Yes.
800,000 for both.
there's not
Yeah,
another
800.
zero in there?
800,000.
Okay.
So,
But again, even that is not a savings, because the only reason these are scheduled is because they're the next highest priority.
Right.
Something else would be. I'm sorry.
and so I think this boils down to, it's no sense doing the feasibility study, as much as two of us think we should. If we really think in the next 3 3/4 years, we're not going to be willing to spend at least 18 million to do something with it, then the feasibility study is probably not worth it. Because even, I think, what we said the other day, the 18 is a safe figure to put in. If you do the modernization, you may or may not get much state money. If you do more than that, you're still gonna, the county's still gonna be spending 18 plus the state money to do more than that. So I guess it boils down to if we had to vote in 2 years whether or not to spend 18 million to do it, and we're gonna say no, then we shouldn't do the feasibility study. If we think it's a possibility,
Right.
then I think we ought to do the feasibility study so we learn more.
And if it is a modernization, to the extent that the state will be in, I believe they still would be in. This is not dependent on it being a new building.
Yeah, but not how much?
I can't answer.
I mean, they're
It's-
not gonna give half or something. It's gonna be,
It's possible.
really?
Yeah.
But, see, this is another thing, this is so much like schools, it's easy to keep going back to schools. Just because a school is eligible for 50 or 45 or 55% state funding, doesn't mean they're gonna give you that
Yep.
funding. So, we don't know that here, and this is a much smaller pot of money. We're talking about $7.5 million compared to $300 or $400 million.
That's what worries me, is the small pot of money statewide. And I think for the schools, we've been fortunate the last few years to get the amount of money we expected from them. It just seems like we hit it at the right time or something.
Yeah, actually got a few projects that we didn't really think we were gonna get.
Yeah.
Again, those are HVAC projects.
And I think it was Winfield Elementary a year or 2 years ago, HVAC shut it down for a couple days. So the old systems they need attention.
Yeah.
Well, does everybody want to recess until 1 o'clock? It's almost 12.
Oh. I mean,
Unless, I don't know, you want to do a working lunch.
are you hungry? We can do whatever the group wants to do. I mean,
Unless somebody wants to discuss something in the next 5 minutes.
I always say cream to standard, not to time, but that's me.
Maybe it's a good time to take a break, because I kind of feel like we're not really going anywhere right now.
That's gonna happen a lot.
I mean, I'm just speaking for everybody at this
No,
point, I
that's-
think. Yeah, so.
I'll just make one quick point
of clarification if I can. So with the public library, do we still have the salary increases in, or do we remove that? Just wanna make
The
sure.
recommended are still in there, but not the ones that are listed there.
Okay.
Well,
I think with the list of potential salary increases, I think we need to look a little bit, what do they have in the budget? And I feel for the library because even though we don't control it, they have about 3%, and they don't have a lot of latitude to move money around to make it more. I don't know. I think what we said the other day, maybe we want to get to a point where we say, okay, and I'm just making up numbers, everybody's just about asking for 10, maybe we ought to do 6 across the board, or, or look at, some already had twice as much in their budget. I don't know, that's a toughie, and I still think, although, I think it's obvious, unless something drastic happens, we're not gonna raise taxes this year. I think that's the consensus setting here, but I still think, and I know we're gonna run out of time soon, but we need to be adding things that have merit and deleting things that we don't think we do and see where we are. And then we're gonna have to cut some stuff. We're gonna have no choice.
And the really hard part is that there's little in front of you that doesn't have a good argument for it. It's not like we have a list of things that, wouldn't it be great if, we built a new swimming pool. Nobody's asking for a swimming pool. It's all pretty much basic stuff.
Yes, it's gonna be hard. Because,
And we've taken out some very large ticket items already. There's not a lot to play around with now. And, the large ticket item now is the schools. I mean, what it comes down to. That's kind of in front of us. And I understand, and again, I'm not for, but I am for maintaining the schools the way we want to maintain them. And that I just don't know how we can get there. Maybe there's a silver bullet somewhere that we're gonna say, stop this or stop that. I mean, another ticket item, like I said, ag preservation, which I am 100% for maintaining, but that's $2.5 million. That's significant.
Just so you know, I checked the drawer before I came down, so no silver bullets.
Yeah. So, this is tough. I mean, it ain't like there's, people are asking for turf fields at every park, because they're not. Some people want them, but they're not. And
that's actually a good point on the idea of things we're after. A lot of our neighbors have a lot of artificial turf fields. We have a lot of people saying, why not us? That's not even part of this conversation.
no, really, and, because I was getting, barked at a lot for turf fields down in the southern part of the
oh
county.
my gosh, yes.
And nobody's coming to me about turf fields now.
Yep.
they still are down in my district.
Are they?
Oh, yes.
Because for me, they're coming to me, they're really going aggressive about schools, not about turf
Yeah.
fields.
It's still a big concern.
I know Liberty, I know some of the high schools, they want them, but they're going after the education. And,
That probably doesn't mean people have lost interest, just that
No,
something became
that's
a
right.
higher urgency.
yeah, no, that's absolutely right. That's absolutely right.
Well, you have to understand too, and turf is tricky because, everybody's kids are not in the school system forever. Kids are constantly moving out of the school system, so you're looking at a whole new
Yeah,
list of concerns by different parents at different points in time.
no, it's true.
So it's always tough to nail down with the schools.
Okay, if you all want to take a break, it's up to you. how long you want to take.
I think we're scheduled to meet back at 1 o'clock.
Well, again, that's up to us, whatever we want. You know, if that's
I'll make
what
a
you want.
motion to recess until 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, all in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.